19-year-old Elara had learned long ago that her life could shift without warning. But nothing prepared her for the moment her father decided her fate with the same casualness he used when trading livestock. The day was dry, the sun sharp, and the dirt beneath her feet cracked like her hopes. Cade Branson's ranch bordered the outer edges of their small, worn-down town, and it was rare for any outsider to step foot onto her father's land. But Cade had come with purpose, to buy a Mustang stallion that Elara's father had been boasting about for months. What Cade didn't expect was that the conversation would twist into something darker, something unforgivable. Her father stumbled through the yard, drunk and desperate for cash he had already spent in his head. "You want the horse?" he barked. "Fine, take the girl too, and we'll call it fair." He said it like it was nothing, like she was nothing. The words hung in the air, heavy, disgusting, unreal. Elara froze. She had known her father could be cruel, but she never imagined he would trade her like a tool he no longer needed. Cade's eyes flicked to her, not with hunger or interest, but with shock. A quiet man with a reputation for keeping to himself, he wasn't used to scenes like this. And Elara, trembling but silent, caught him completely off guard. She wasn't a woman dragged screaming. She wasn't pleading. She simply stood there, arms wrapped around her thin body. Her chin lifted just enough to show she hadn't given up on her dignity. Even if the world seemed eager to strip it from her dot, her father's voice grew harder, more threatening, pushing the deal. Cade didn't answer right away. Something in him protested, revolted even. But as he looked at Elara, at the bruise half hidden under her collar, the emptiness in her eyes, the way she flinched every time her father stepped too close, he realized the bargain wasn't about ownership. It was a rescue disguised as a transaction. If he walked away, she stayed here. And he had seen enough in that 5-minute exchange to know here was hell. So he said what she least expected. "I'll take her." Elara's breath caught, not out of fear, but disbelief. No man had ever chosen to take responsibility for her without wanting something in return. She waited for a demand, an order, a price for her compliance. Cade gave her none. He simply gestured toward his wagon and said, "Come if you want to." That was the moment everything inside her cracked. He was giving her a choice, something she'd been denied her whole life. Her father scoffed, muttered something about useless girls, and turned away, already forgetting she existed. But Cade didn't rush her. He didn't touch her. He didn't even look directly at her. He just waited. With trembling hands, Elara picked up the small cloth bag that held her few belongings. She stepped toward the wagon, feeling as though the ground might fall away beneath her. Cade nodded once, respectfully, gently, and helped her climb up without laying a hand on her. It was the smallest gesture, but to her, it felt monumental. As the wagon rolled away from the only home she had ever known, Elara expected fear to claw at her. Instead, a strange quiet settled in her chest. Not quite peace. Not yet, but the first breath of freedom. She didn't know who Cade really was. She didn't know what awaited her at his ranch. But she did know one thing. For the first time in her life, someone had seen her worth, not as a bargain, not as property, but as a human being. And that changed everything. The road to Cade Branson's ranch stretched wide and empty. A ribbon of dust that carried Elara farther from the life she had known and deeper into one she couldn't yet imagine. She sat stiffly beside him in the wagon, hands clenched in her lap, waiting for the moment when his kindness would evaporate and the truth of his intentions would show. Men didn't take in girls without expecting something back. At least, that was what her father had always told her. But Cade kept his eyes on the horizon, speaking only when necessary, giving her space to breathe for the first time in years. When they reached the ranch, she was struck by its quiet strength. The property wasn't grand, but it was orderly, fences fixed, pastures green, horses healthy. It was the kind of place built by hands that worked with intention. Cade climbed down first, then stepped aside so she could descend without him touching her. Again, a gesture so small, but to her, it felt like the world-shifting dot inside the house. He cleared his throat, uneasy, as if he wasn't used to having anyone under his roof. "You'll have your own room," he said. "It's not much, but it's yours." The word yours hit her like a warm wind. Her own room? In her father's house, she'd been shoved into a storage corner, sleeping between crates and tools. Here, she was given a space with a bed, a window, and a quilt that looked handmade. He didn't watch her as she explored the little room. Instead, he busied himself in the kitchen, keeping a respectful distance. He made her a plate of warm stew, sliding it toward her across the table without commentary. Ilara ate slowly, waiting for him to sit across from her and start asking questions. But he didn't. He ate quietly, eyes lowered, giving her space to find comfort at her own pace. After supper, he laid out the rules, if they could even be called that. "You're not here to serve me," he said simply. "You help where you can. You rest when you need to, and if you ever want to leave, you can. No one's going to stop you." The words unsettled her. Men didn't give freedom. Men didn't surrender power. Yet Cade offered it to her like he was handing her water dot the next morning. She woke to sunlight gently brushing the quilt. For the first time in years, she'd slept without fear of doors slamming or drunken shouting. Cade was already outside, feeding the horses. When she stepped into the yard, unsure whether she was allowed, he only nodded. "You can help with the mares today. Only if you want to." If you want to dot, it was the theme of his every word. He taught her how to brush their coats properly, how to approach the nervous ones from the side, how to whisper to them so they'd settle. He never raised his voice, never barked orders. He didn't hover, but he stayed close enough that she felt safe without feeling trapped. For Ilara, the strangest part wasn't the work, it was the absence of fear. She kept waiting for the moment he'd remind her that she was here because she'd been traded, that she owed him, that she belonged to him, but it never came. Instead, he gave her clean clothes and a pair of boots that actually fit. He showed her the boundaries of the property, not as walls, but as places she was welcome to roam. He even handed her a small knife for protection when moving through the fields, something no man had ever trusted her with. Slowly, she realized the shocking truth. Cade's ranch had rules, but none of them were chains. They were choices, boundaries made for safety, not control. And as she settled into the rhythm of the ranch, a fragile sense of belonging began to take root, though she still couldn't admit it to herself. She wasn't ready to trust him. But she couldn't deny that, for the first time, she felt like a person rather than a possession, and that alone was enough to change everything. The days on Cade Branson's ranch unfolded with a quiet rhythm that Ilara had never known. Dawn came early, painting the sky in soft streaks of gold. And with it came the sounds of life horses snorting in their stalls, wind brushing over the dry grass, and Cade's steady footsteps as he moved through his morning chores. For the first few days, Ilara simply watched him from a distance, trying to understand this man who had taken her in without asking for anything in return. Cade was a puzzle made of silence. He didn't speak much, didn't smile often, and didn't fill the air with unnecessary chatter. Yet his presence was strangely grounding. He was patient when he explained tasks, gentle with the animals, and unexpectedly thoughtful when it came to her comfort. He never touched her without asking, never crowded her, never made her feel small. If anything, he seemed as unsure of her as she was of him. Ilara started helping with the daily chores, not because Cade demanded it, but because doing something made her feel less like a burden. She learned how to sweep the barn aisle, how to mix the feed, how to tell when a mare needed rest. Cade taught her everything with a slow steadiness that soothed her nerves. He had a way of showing rather than commanding, guiding rather than correcting. One morning, Cade invited her to meet the Mustang Stallion, the very horse her father had traded her for. The animal was stunning, wild, spirited, and wary of anyone who got too close. Alara approached carefully, fingers trembling, expecting the Mustang to shy away. But Cade placed a hand on her shoulder light, brief, and murmured, "He senses fear but respects honesty. Don't pretend you're brave. Just be steady." His words were the first she'd heard that acknowledged her fear without belittling it. Slowly, the Mustang allowed her near. Alara touched his coat, feeling the strength beneath the surface, the untamed fire that reminded her painfully of herself. "He's not broken," Cade said quietly. "Just misunderstood." Alara didn't miss the parallel. Neither did he. Over the following days, they fell into a soft, unspoken companionship. They worked side by side fixing fences, clearing brush, feeding the livestock. It wasn't the tasks themselves that changed things. It was the moments in between. The way Cade would pause to let her catch up. The way Alara would steal glances at him when he wasn't looking. The way their hands brushed accidentally when both reached for the same tool, followed by a silence thick with something neither could name. Cade wasn't used to having another soul in his home. Sometimes he forgot she was there, like when she walked into the kitchen and startled him into dropping a spoon. Other times, he was hyper-aware of her presence, especially at night when he heard her soft footsteps moving through the house, unable to sleep. He never confronted her, never questioned her. He only made sure a lamp was left on in the hallway so she wouldn't have to walk in the dark. Alara noticed his small kindnesses, even when he didn't realize he was offering them. She noticed the way he stood a little straighter when she praised his cooking, the way he cleared his throat awkwardly when she smiled at him, the way he always positioned himself between her and any hint of danger, even something as harmless as a skittish colt dot slowly. The ranch stopped, feeling like a stranger's land, and began to feel like a place where she belonged, not because Cade treated her like family, but because he treated her like a person, a woman with choices, with value, with a future, and though neither dared to speak it aloud, a quiet bond, delicate but undeniable, began to grow between them. It wasn't love yet. It wasn't trust yet. But it was the beginning of something neither had expected. Two lonely hearts, learning to breathe in the same space. The sky warned them long before the storm arrived. By late afternoon, clouds gathered like bruises across the horizon, dark, swollen, and restless. The wind carried a sharp bite, lifting dust from the ground and making the horses restless in their stalls. Cade had seen storms like this before. Alara hadn't, but she felt it, an unease threading through the air, heavy as a held breath. "Tonight's going to be rough," Cade said, tightening a rope across the barn doors. "Stay close to the house." Alara followed him through the yard, her skirts whipping around her legs as the wind grew stronger. Every boom of distant thunder made her flinch, though she tried to hide it. Cade noticed, silently shifting his pace so he stayed between her and the direction of the wind, shielding her without making a show of it. By the time they made it inside, rain slammed the roof like fists. Lightning cracked open the sky, illuminating the house in sharp white flashes. The storm came fast and violent, turning the world outside into a swirling mess of wind, mud, and noise. Inside, the ranch house felt suddenly too small. Alara sat near the hearth, hugging her knees to her chest. She hated storms. They reminded her of drunken nights when her father would rage through the house, breaking things, shouting at shadows, leaving her trembling in a corner. Lightning was just noise, thunder just sound, but fear didn't follow logic. It followed memory. Cade set a kettle on the stove, trying to act normal. But the storm rattled him too, not out of fear, but because he could feel her tension like a second heartbeat in the room. "You okay?" He finally asked, voice low, gentle. "I'm fine." She lied. The kettle began to whistle, a shrill cry that pierced the silence. Alara flinched so sharply she nearly dropped the cup he handed her. Cade paused. Something in her expression-tight shoulders, clenched jaw, eyes too wide told him everything she wasn't saying. "You don't have to pretend," he said softly. "Not with me." Her breath hitched. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not with patience, not with understanding, not with room to unravel. He sat across from her at the small kitchen table, folding his hands. He didn't push, didn't pry, simply waited. The storms were bad, she whispered. "When I lived with him." Cade's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "It wasn't the weather," she added. "It was him. The yelling. The breaking things." She swallowed hard. "I always felt like I had to disappear." The storm roared outside, but inside, another storm smaller, quieter broke open. Cade leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You don't have to disappear here," he said. "Not ever." His words were simple, but they cracked something inside her, something she had kept locked behind years of silence. Her eyes burned. She looked away, ashamed to cry in front of him. But Cade stood, walked to the hearth, and placed another log on the fire. Not to distract her, not to comfort her, just to give her space to breathe. "You're free here, Alara," he murmured. "If you stay, it's by your choice. Not because of a trade." That struck deeper than anything else he had said. Freedom. Choice. Two things she had never truly known. Lightning split the sky again, shaking the walls. Instinctively, she rose and moved closer to him, not touching, just near enough to feel his steadiness. Cade didn't comment, didn't shift away. He simply stood there, a quiet pillar of safety in a world that had never offered her any. For the first time, she didn't flinch at the thunder. She breathed deep, steady, unbroken, and she realized something terrifying and beautiful. She didn't fear Cade. She trusted him. The storm outside raged on, but inside the house, something softer, more powerful, began to take shape, the fragile beginning of a bond built not on obligation, but on choice. By the time spring settled over the ranch, Alara had grown into her place like a seed finally given soil. She woke each morning with purpose, poured feed into troughs with steady hands, and walked the fields with confidence she hadn't known she could possess. And Cade, quiet, watchful, respectful Cade, never tried to claim her, never pressed her, never treated her as anything but a woman with her own will. Their days were filled with small conversations, shared glances, and moments that lingered a little too long. A fragile peace had taken root, but peace, she learned, rarely lasts unchallenged. It began with whispers in town. Cade had gone in for supplies, and Alara stayed behind to mend a fence. The wind carried voices from the main road, women gossiping, men laughing crudely, children repeating what they'd overheard at home. "Did you hear? Branson traded a horse for that girl. Poor thing must be his. You know, he's probably keeping her locked up. Hell, my neighbor said she never sets foot in town." They didn't know she heard them. They didn't know she was standing just beyond the fence line, heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. By the time Cade returned, she was trembling, not because of the rumors, but because she feared they would ruin everything. Cade saw it in an instant, his expression darkening with concern. Before she could hide, the riders from town appeared along the road, dust swirling around their horses. And at the front of the group was her father. Her blood ran cold. He hadn't come alone. 3 men flanked him, smirking with the arrogance of people who believed cruelty was a sport. Her father dismounted, swaggering forward with the same sour grin she remembered all too well. "Well," he said, spitting in the dirt, Seems like I made a bad deal." His eyes roamed over her, cold and possessive. "A horse ain't worth much these days. Should have asked for cash." Cade stepped between them with a calmness so controlled it was terrifying. "She's not yours to claim." Her father laughed loud, mocking, the sound of a man who had always gotten his way. "She's my daughter," he snarled, "and I didn't give her to you to keep. I want money, today." Cade didn't move. "Elara chooses where she stays." The men behind her father shifted, hands drifting toward rifles. It was a moment thick with danger, one wrong word away from violence. Elara felt every heartbeat, every breath, every ounce of fear that had once defined her. She had lived her whole life shrinking from her father's voice, hoping to remain invisible. But she wasn't invisible anymore. And she wasn't the trembling girl he traded away. She was a woman now. A woman who had learned freedom tasted sweeter than obedience. She stepped forward before Cade could stop her. "No," she said, voice steady, clear, unshaking. "You don't get to claim me. Not anymore." Her father turned toward her, stunned. He wasn't used to defiance. She had never dared speak against him. But she didn't stop. "You sold me," she said. "You traded me like cargo. You lost the right to call me your daughter the moment you did." His face turned red, his hand twitching as if he might strike her, but Cade moved instantly. Standing firm between them, Elara continued, louder this time, "I'm not property. Not yours, not anyone's. I choose where I live. I choose who I trust. And I choose to stay here." The last words echoed across the yard like a shot. Her father sputtered, threatened, cursed. But it didn't matter. He could see it. She was no longer the frightened girl he controlled. The men behind him shifted uncomfortably. No one wanted to pick a fight when the outcome suddenly seemed uncertain. Eventually, with one final glare, her father spat at the ground and mounted his horse. "This ain't over," he growled, but when he rode away, Elara felt something inside her lift, something heavy, something old. She had confronted her past. She had chosen her future. And for the first time, the future she chose included Cade not because she owed him, but because he had shown her what true respect felt like. Asterisk in the days after her father's departure, the ranch felt different, not in its structure or its routine, but in the air itself. The tension that once clung to every corner had dissolved, leaving behind a quiet sense of certainty. Elara woke each morning with a steadier heartbeat. The world seemed clearer, the sky wider. She had faced the man who once controlled every breath she took and survived. More than survived. She had reclaimed her voice, but the truest change was the shift between her and Cade. For weeks, their relationship had been a slow, gentle orbit. They worked side by side, ate at the same table, spoke in quiet tones that revealed more in their pauses than their words. But now, after standing up to her father, with Cade behind her like a shield, she had chosen rather than been given. Something unspoken lingered between them. Something warm. Something hopeful. Elara felt it most acutely in the small things. In the way his gaze softened when she walked into a room. In the way he hesitated before speaking, as though weighing whether she was comfortable. In the way he touched the brim of his hat whenever she thanked him for anything. Embarrassed by praise he didn't feel he'd earned. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon, Cade found her brushing down the Mustang in the barn. The horse nickered softly as she ran a hand down his neck, her movements relaxed, confident. Months ago, she would have flinched at his every step. Now she moved like someone who belonged in her own skin. "You've gotten good with him," Cade murmured from the doorway. Elara looked up, smiling not shyly but openly. "You taught me." He shifted, suddenly uncertain. "You did the work." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the soft rustle of hay and the slow, rhythmic breathing of the animals. The barn felt impossibly still, holding its breath for whatever might come next. Alara set down the brush and approached him slowly, giving him time to step away if he wished. He didn't. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. But his eyes, usually guarded, held a flicker of emotion she had never seen so clearly. "You know," she said quietly, "I stayed because it was my choice, not because I had nowhere else to go." Cade swallowed hard. "I know." She reached out, hesitant, and touched his hand. His breath caught just slightly, but he didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers curled around hers, rough and warm and gentle all at once. "No one has ever given me a choice," she whispered. "You did. Every day. Even when it cost you something." Cade exhaled, his voice low. "It didn't cost me. Keeping you safe was never a burden." Her throat tightened with emotion. "Cade, I want to stay. Not because you rescued me. Not because you gave me a home. But because," her voice wavered, "I feel safe with you. I feel happy." The word seemed to stun him. Happiness was not something he had expected to bring into anyone's life. He'd lived too long in silence to imagine he could change someone's world so deeply. Cade lifted his hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek, his touch trembling with the weight of everything he didn't know how to say. "You're free, Alara," he murmured. "Free to stay. Free to go. Free to choose." She stepped closer, pressing her forehead lightly against his. "Then I choose you." The ranch seemed to inhale with them, the moment tender and powerful. Outside, the Mustang whinnied as though sensing the shift, the transformation from fear to freedom. From strangers to partners, from survivors of circumstance to builders of a shared life. In the weeks that followed, their bond deepened into something steady and meaningful. They shared laughter over burned biscuits, worked through long days under the sun, and rested together on the porch as the stars filled the sky. Their love was not rushed, not claimed, not demanded, it was chosen. And for Alara, there was no greater miracle.